have. Um, Bill, how long have you been coming?
I think
10. 10? Okay, so we're right on the money. About the same time, and I've been on the board for about 7, so I've known Bill for quite some time. We met here, we became friends here. I love when these guys from Ohio come. They are the wild ones. They're the ones you're going to hear whooping and hollering as this goes on. Bill and me met, and we've become really good friends. I know his wife very well, yeah, we do some stuff together. We get together. We're planning another venture this fall, and I'm just going to tell you that he's an amazing man. And he's from Willoughby, Ohio, okay? And I just want you to know, since he moved there, he's so famous and so good, they named it Willoughby, Ohio. And his name is Bill, okay? So they named it after both his names, so he must be something special. That's all I know. It is my pleasure and my honor to introduce Bill Monreal from Willoughby, Ohio.
Hi, I'm Bill. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, they named it after me because I'm so humble. So, anytime I'm at a conference, I sit out there and I try to figure out how old is the speaker. I don't know why I do that. I always, I put their sobriety date together, then I try and follow the chronology of the lead and try to figure. So I'll start off with I'm 52 years old. Save you all that work if you do the same thing. My sobriety date's November 10th, 1992. I'm the oldest of 4 kids. Both my parents are members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they got sober in '81. My dad in February, and my mom in July. Prior to them coming into Alcoholics Anonymous, our house was an absolute disaster. My dad's a Vietnam vet. He's got PTSD, and all that means is the range of emotions I could experience from my father, not changing my actions, would go from total indifference to absolute violence, generally somewhere in the middle. But I just didn't know what I was going to expect. And then it would also vary based on how drunk he was. And then my mom, she had mental problems. She bounced in and out of mental institutions. She attempted suicide multiple times and in front of me multiple times, and I stopped her on multiple occasions. All that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that I'm an alcoholic, really, right? But I don't think I could have recovered from that state of mind, from that sense of hopelessness, had it not been for the 12 steps, had it not been for Alcoholics Anonymous, right? This power that I tapped into. So my folks quit drinking when I was 10, 11, and I started drinking then. I drank as casually as a 10 or 11-year-old kid could. By the time I'm 13 years old, I'm drinking 3 to 4 days a week. By the time I'm 16 years old, I'm drinking every day, all day long. And the only thing that would give me relief would be to pass out or black out. Now, I don't know when I had my first drink. Like I said, my parents are alcoholics. I've been drinking as long as I can remember, right? I know that I fell in love with it when I was around 10 years old. When I was 16 years old, my typical day for me, I'd be waking up at about 6 a.m., and I would start drinking before I hit the shower, right? I would be drinking in the shower, and I would be drinking as soon as I got out of the shower. And when I say drinking, that includes smoking pot, whatever. I've done everything shy of stick a needle in my arm. I certainly would have done that if it was available. I've been scraped off of crack house floors. I don't really go into detail about any of that stuff, right? But anyway, my buddy would come pick me up, and we had discovered there was a non-taxable commodities distribution and brokering network that we could become a part of, right? It was a little bit of a pyramid scheme, and but it was lucrative, so we got involved in this, and we would drive down to Cleveland and pick up our commodities, and then drive back out to the eastern suburbs and distribute the products we had just purchased. I would be drunk in class, and I would pass out, and I would wake up in between class when the bell went off, and I would distribute my product in the bathroom, go to the next class, pass out, and do it again. And this is at 16 years old. I had 2 weeks left in sophomore year. I was barely making it through school at this point. Given aptitude, I should have aced every course. I should have been in honors. Like I took the least challenging classes I could find, and I just skated. I didn't study unless I absolutely had to. And 2 weeks left in school, Aerosmith concert. I got tickets. I got a bunch of buddies together. You know, I mean, I'm loaded for bear going to school because we're leaving right from school and going to the concert. I apparently was in a blackout the night before. I called the girl in my class, and she was concerned because I was talking suicidal. And she called, or went in the next morning and talked to the nun, and the nun talked to the dean of discipline, and the dean of discipline dragged me out of class. And he told me that, I was suspended. He made up some reason that didn't make any sense. I thought it was garbage. I mean, I've been fooling this guy for 2 years. I thought I was ahead of this guy. I was much smarter than he was, right under his nose I'm doing all this bad stuff, and he suspended me and told me to just sit down and shut up. By the end of that day, my parents came in, and they sat me down, and the nun and the dean of discipline and my parents said, we think you got a problem with drugs and alcohol. And I tried to calm my way out of it. The long and short, I ended up at a treatment center that evening and didn't go to the concert. My dad and I fist fought on the way out to the meeting in the back seat of the car. My mom was in the front seat with her finger on the power locks, and this poor nun was driving the car, right? It was, I don't know if you've ever seen The Exorcist, but I kind of resembled, that. And every time we'd slow down, I'd pop the lock, or I'd hit my seatbelt, because we didn't eat seatbelts at all back then. But on this trip, they made me wear one, right? Because I kept trying to get out of the car. So they put the seatbelt on, they locked the doors, and my dad's sitting like right on top of me. The car would slow down, I'd pop the seatbelt, pop the lock, open the door, and just I'd fall. I was willing to fall out. I didn't care where we were at, And he would drag me back in by my hair, my belt strap, and I was absolutely out of control. But I tell you, I felt at that point in my life that I was entitled to act the way that I did, right? Because that pain from that alcoholism, my parents' alcoholism, was real, right? I felt not good enough. I felt like I needed to do something. I did everything I could to make my family right? I cooked for my brother and sisters. I watched out for them. I watched out for my mom. The world owed me something, right? I was just in pain from that. I felt justified in all of this thinking. I later found out how wrong I was, but at that point in my life, I felt justified in my behavior. But I am a teenager, right? I'm rebellious, and I'm a teenager, and I'm in this treatment center, and I don't want to be there. And I've been in 3 treatment facilities throughout my lifetime. 2 of them as a juvenile, and 1 as an adult. I made escape attempts at all 3 of them. I succeeded twice. So, I think I got 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? I got a pretty good track record. The first one, we had a family counseling session. It's 28 days of a 38-day program. And my family comes in, and I say some horrible things to my mother. Right? And they're telling, they go around the group and say, hey, my mom, Pat, they say, Pat, we understand you got some news you want to share with the group. And my mom says, well, we really don't spot at my home group, but if I make it 11 more days, I'll have 7 years. And the group erupts with laughter and cheering, and they're all excited, happy for her. Now, prior to the meeting starting, she had said something to me, probably like, hello, or I love you. I don't know what it was, but whatever she had said to me, it made me angry. And when I got angry at that time, I would just go over and over and over the experience that happened, and blinders would come on, and I would become filled with rage. And so they went around, and a couple people made these flowery, frothy, emotional comments to my mother, and I became more and more disgusted as this process went on. And they said, well, what do you think about that, Bill? And now I'm raging. With every bit of hatred, disdain, and loathing I can bring up, I look my mom dead in the eyes and say, why don't you take a drink? And she got up. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Only time I've ever seen a block wall shake in my life. She got up and walked out of the room, slammed the door. My dad followed her, veins popping out of his head. More important than them, though, my 2 sisters, heads down, full of shame, walking out the room. And my brother following him up. Nice job, Bill. Thanks a lot. Right? They left. They sent me to my room. My roommate comes in. He asked me, they sent him in to calm me down. His first words are, "Do you want to get out of here?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's do that," right? So really, Chip is the one to blame for all of my future escape attempts, is my theory, right? I wasn't even in my mind at that moment. So I changed into my tennis shoes. We hit the door. The alarm goes off. We're on the third story. And funny, I heard a speaker at Punderson last year who was in the same treatment center I was, and we had a good conversation on that. She ended up staying sober, but I did not. So we hit the door. The alarm goes off, and now everybody's alerted that we're going. We're 3 stories up. Make it down to the bottom. Come out the door, and there's the art therapist, like, I don't know, 4'8" art therapist, right? In her car, eyes wide open, and she throws her car in the park, jumps out and starts chasing after us. Chip is like 6'4", 280, just a big dude, right? Big country boy. And we book through this open field. Now, we're in Cleveland, right? We get through this open field, like a torn down building field, and make it into this neighborhood, and we lose the art therapist. And we get on this road, and we're hitchhiking, trying to make it up to 90. And Chip has, like, second thoughts. Like, it's his idea, and now he's got second thoughts, right? And he's like, "Man, Bill, I think this is a bad idea. We should go back. What are our parents going to think?" He's trying to talk reason into me. I'm like, "Chip, you can go back. I'm not going," right? And I'm trying to hitchhike. Chip is standing in front of my thumb, and this is not working really well. So I just sprint down the street with my left thumb out. I turn around and flip my right out. This El Camino pulls up. And I jump in, and the guy starts, asking me where I'm going, and Chip catches up to us, slams his hand on the car, says, "Don't take him. He just escaped from Glen Bay. You're going to hurt him more than you're going to help him." And this guy, his eyes got as big as saucers, and he's like, "Is that true?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's go." And he hits the gas, and we end up on 90, and he drops me off, and I hitchhike home. And my parents catch up with me a couple hours later because I went to my buddy's house, and his mom called my mom. And they come and they said, "Look, you can stay out of that treatment center." And they honestly believed that this treatment center is turning their little angel, right? They're still guilt-ridden from their own drinking with me, and I'm selling every bit of pain I have for pennies on the dollar, right? And they believe their little angel Billy is being warped by this treatment center. And so they say, "You can't come home, though. You got to go stay in this halfway house." And I go stay in this halfway house, and it's like, it's not a real halfway house. It's like some weirdo guy has a bunch of teenagers staying at his house, right? And then my parents didn't know this, right? But that's what it was. And I came out of there unscathed, and I stayed sober 3 months, and I drank again. And I wasn't surprised I drank, and I don't know that anybody else was surprised that I drank, because I came around here and I wasted your time, right? And I was forced to be here in my mindset. And that makes me think about things like, if I'm forcing someone to come to an AA meeting, am I diluting the meeting? Am I taking away the purpose? Anybody that wants to be here, we're welcome, right? Alcoholics Anonymous is the most inclusive, welcoming organization I've ever been a part of, I've ever heard of. But if I'm forcing you to be here, am I hurting the meeting? Am I hurting the organization? And am I hurting me? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm not implying one way or the other, right? It just makes me think about that. Because I didn't want to be here. And I was a punk in these AA meetings. And they would let us out of school to go to these meetings because they had this brand new, it was like the 80s. They had all these treatment centers coming out, all these new ideas about how you should help children that are struggling with addiction. And so they let us go to the club. There's a club like a mile down the road from school. And we would get out of school at any time if there was a meeting and go up there and talk to these drunks and attend these meetings. And one afternoon, or as like 11 o'clock, me and several people from school went up to the meeting. And there's me and 3 girls sitting in this booth, and we're giggling and screwing around the whole meeting. And as you notice somebody else is like starting to look over to you and like, "What are you kids doing?" we would quiet down. And then we get loud again, and we did it over and over and over during the meeting. But the people there knew my parents, and they knew me, and they felt I was responsible for that, I guess. And I kind of was, but I think about this experience fondly today, but I didn't. I was so angry. And, the people that made me angry are the ones that I knew really loved me at the end of the day. I didn't know it in the moment. I didn't know it at all at that point. So the meeting ends. This guy, his name's John Daniels, but everybody calls him Jack, so Jack Daniels, right? And he makes this comment to the lead, and he was a good speaker. He spoke all over the place. And he made this comment to the speaker, and I remember thinking, boy, that's a good comment. And then he does this whole deal, right? He looks at the speaker, he looks at me, he looks at the speaker, he looks at me, and he does this 3 times. He says, you know what I cannot stand? Our snot-nosed punks coming around to Alcoholics Anonymous, wasting a seat when someone who really wants it can't have it. And he just went on, right? And I don't know how long that went. I just knew I wanted to kill him, right? Like, this old man is going to die at my hands. And the meeting ended, and all these people came up to me right away, right? And they're like, oh, my God, that was inappropriate. You do not deserve to be treated that way, right? That's not how Alcoholics Anonymous works, and not that any of them were wrong. None of them were wrong. But Jack was the only person in that room that day that had the guts to tell me who and what I was. And he was not afraid what you thought about him. Now think about that for a minute, right? I think about that today. Am I willing to do that? I try to avoid any sort of public confrontation unless it's absolutely necessary. But if a guy really needs it, am I willing to do it? And that's a tough one to do. So anyway, I get drunk again. I'm 3 months sober. I drink again. I drink for 2 weeks. I have a massive overdose. Now I don't know. I drank for about 2 weeks. Everything seemed to go okay. I didn't get in any trouble. I skipped school, and if you'd have given me birth control at this point and told me that it would get me high, I would have eaten it, right? Like, it didn't matter. So we're at this girl's house, and we got a 6-pack, and there's like 8 of us. Like, this ain't gonna work. The math doesn't work. So somebody breaks out some prescription cough syrup. I guzzle that down, and some pills come out, and I just throw handfuls down, and I start drinking. And next thing I know, I am back at this halfway house, covered head to toe in mud, and I don't remember the last day and a half that's gone by, right? Or full day that went by. But apparently I passed out in a ditch on the side of a street, and it was raining. Luckily ended up on my back. Water was up to my ears when my friends found me. Ended up at my girlfriend's house that night, covered in mud, destroyed the relationship. And the next morning, my dad is dragging me out of bed at this halfway house, dragging me to the car, and I just remember this poetic stream of vulgarity coming out of his mouth. And I'm browning in and out. And I don't remember really being at home, but I was at home, and I'm sitting at the dining room table, and my brother and sisters have to go to school. And I'm there, one eye blinks, the other one doesn't. I'm drooling, right? You can clap your hands, yell my name, I do not respond. And my brother and sisters have to eat breakfast at this table and then go to school. And, how do you repay, when I do my 9th step, when I try to be of service to God, how do I really repay that, right? I can't ever make that right in the truest sense of the word, but I can be right with the world and I can be right with God. And that's what the 12 steps do for me. So I end up in another treatment center, and there was another escape attempt. So this is it was a 28-day program and 5 days of intake or whatever, detox. So I'm getting close to the end. I'm like a week away from the end, and I have this plan. Now, this unit is a little different setup, right? They don't have the doors that you can hit, and it's magnetic locks, and you got to hit the button, and if there is a fire, the doors will open, but, you can't open them on your own. And so I devised this plan. It looks like this, I can get above the ceiling, and I can get over these magnetically locked doors. I just have to, the ceilings are like 12 foot tall or something. I got to figure a way to get up there. And so I devised this plan, and one day this counselor gets in my face, pins me against the wall, and starts yelling at me. It's a woman, right? She's yelling at me and getting in my face, and then I'm like, oh yeah? And I turn her around, and now she's against the wall, and I'm like, I'm done. I go into my room, and I flip the mattress off the bed. I take the box spring, take it into the bathroom, turn it around, because it's like a ladder, right, if it's backwards. I pin it against the wall, and I start climbing up. And I get up to the ceiling. I'm trying to figure out how I get into the ceiling, and one of the counselors comes into my bedroom. And he knocks on the door. He's like, Bill, I need to come in there. I'm like, hey, I'm going to the bathroom, man. Can I have some privacy, right? And he's like, I need to come in. And, there's no lock on the door or anything. So he opens the door, and it doesn't push. And so he throws his shoulder into it, and it starts to move a little bit. But the box spring is tilted against the door, right? So he hits the door. I pop up a little bit, and the door closes, and I fall back down again. And we do this a few times, and he's getting nowhere. So now he gets another guy, and they come back, and one of them's holding the knob open, and the other guy's running across the room and throwing his shoulder into the door. And now I'm really popping up in the air and coming back down. And, this goes on a few times, and eventually I'm like, I just got to give up this attempt. This ain't going to work. So I just jump on the box spring, and it's now perpendicular to the door. So that I'm wedged in here, and the stalemate starts, right? And they're threatening me with all kinds of punitive action and all this stuff, and this is where I really first learned how to negotiate, right here. And, they're telling me that, this is not right, and you need to come out, and, my parents are going to find out, and I'm in big trouble, and then I'm not coming out. I said, okay, well, we're going to take the door off. I said, well, good luck. The hinges are on the inside, I don't know how you're going to accomplish that one. And they regroup, and they come back like, okay, we're going to cut the door out of the wall. Like, oh, that's interesting. I said, I don't think your insurance will really appreciate that, but, my lawyer probably will. And, I'm a 16, 17-year-old kid. I hope I never come across somebody like me in that situation. And they finally are like, what are we going to do with this kid? So they say, well, what do you want? I said, well, I just want total and absolute immunity for all of my actions. And they pretty easily gave that up, right? They're like, okay. And I said, well, I don't know if that's good enough. I think I really need somebody that's like in authority here, right? Somebody that can really bind the hospital to that commitment. So they get the director of the hospital down there, and we have a brief conversation in which he agrees to give me total and absolute immunity. And I take him at his word, and I pull the box spring up, and the door opens, and, they let me out, and my parents didn't even know that ever happened, right? But that was my one failure of escape right there. I didn't escape from that treatment center. I didn't learn anything in treatment that provided me any real value other than, hey, here's Alcoholics Anonymous, here's a big book, the 12 steps are what you need to do. Right? The 12 steps are what's going to set you free. That hole that you feel in your gut, that ill-at-ease, discontented, never fitting anywhere you go feeling can be fixed by these 12 steps, right? Everything you're looking for in the drink, right, to be free from the bondage of self, to feel like a normal human being, the 12 steps will do for you. That's the information they gave me there, but they didn't give it to me in that same manner, right? Here's a $28,000 bill, and here's your big book, right? That's how that went for me. And I don't knock treatment one way or the other. I know guys that have gone through it's been very helpful for them and all kind of stuff, right? But I never have gotten sober as a byproduct of going to treatment. I have only gotten sober by coming to you, right? By coming to you people, right? When I was an unlovable creature, I came to you. And by finding this relationship with this God, and doing everything that I can to connect and to ask and to listen. And so I got out of this treatment center, and I was pretty badly beaten up when I went in. And I was a little afraid. And I stayed sober for about 9 months. I did the same garbage that I did before. I didn't work any steps. I was a punk kid running around AA. And I had known of this guy. And my folks had been sober about 7 years at this point, and I had been to a ton of AA. I knew every old timer in the east side of Cleveland. I was a little kid running around AA, and now I'm a punk teenager, right? And this guy, I was at a meeting, I was sitting on this bench after the meeting, and this guy that looks like if Albert Einstein and an extremely violent biker had a baby, that would be this guy, right? Like crazy long hair, and he was just, I mean, I thought there was a body count associated with this guy. I didn't know, but I mean, he just seemed, he was scary. He was an intimidating guy. And like even guys that were like 6'10", 250, 280 were intimidated by this guy. Like he was a scary guy. And he comes over to me at the meeting. He says, I know your parents. I know the garbage you've been pulling, you know, and I'm your sponsor till you find somebody else. And more important than that, he said, this guy's going to pick you up for the meeting tomorrow, and this guy's going to pick you up the day after that. And it was like this gang of AA terrorists just swarmed around me. Like, they were brutal. I mean, they were, thank God I was young because they kind of ignored me, right? But they would just take each other's inventories relentlessly. And when they said they were coming to pick me up, it was like, you know, I just went. I don't know. I was afraid not to go with these guys. I got to 9 months sober, and I hadn't done anything. I hadn't done any work, and the monster was still alive inside of me. I didn't really buy that there was a God or any of that garbage, and I drank again. And this time I drank for like a year and a half. You know, almost all my senior year and a little before and a little after. And, you know, within 2 weeks of drinking, I'm back to that non-taxable commodities distribution and brokering, right? It's like as soon as I start drinking, that's my primary source of income. I start to become unemployable, but my dad, my family has a funeral home, and my dad would give me a job there, and I would be hammered, and he wouldn't fire me. Right? And I would show up to work 2 hours late, you know, just burnt out of my mind, and he wouldn't fire me. And any other employer, though, I would not have been able to keep this job. And so I got to graduation. I barely graduated. At one point, I had a 0.3 GPA, right? Like total opposite of my aptitude, and by that was like at the beginning of junior year, I got that 0.3, and by the time I graduated, I think the last quarter, I got like a 2.1. So I was still trying to do better, right? But I barely graduate high school. I start looking at colleges. I can't get in anywhere except for the community college. And so I get into I enroll into the community college, and I know I'm going to fail, but whatever, right? I'm just drinking every day. I graduate high school, and I'm drinking as soon as I wake up in the morning, all the way till I pass out or black out that night. And I've been sober a while, right? Like last year in the summer, I had lunch with a guy I went to high school with, and we're doing a business lunch, and right in the middle of lunch, he's like, "Do you remember that time you headbutted me and threw me down the steps at that party?" And I'm like, "No, I do not." And I believe you. I believe what you're saying happened, right? I mean, I'm not disputing that, and I'm sorry that happened, but what can I do to make that right? And, that was a pretty humbling moment. I've been sober a long time. I've done a lot of things that I'm proud to say that I've done, right? Charity work, and I got a beautiful family and all kind of things, but that, I can never forget who and what I am when I have a drink in my system. So I was still out there drinking, right? I'm out there drinking, and it's senior year. I graduate, and I'm drinking every day, all night. And one night I just have this inspiration to turn right when I'm supposed to go straight. I say, "God help me," and I end up turning right. And then the thought occurs to me that my buddy lives over this way that's sober. And I end up at his trailer, and his roommate's not there, and him and I sit there talking, and I'm a loser. My life is a failure. And I make this deal with God that I'm never, ever going to drink again. And I meant it. I meant it with every fiber of my being. Everything I had at my disposal, I meant it. I never, ever wanted to drink again. And I got busy, and I started working the steps this time, the first time. And I worked them the way they're outlined in the big book, with a little asterisk there, right? It didn't seem very consequential at the time, but turns out it's a disaster. The ninth step, like there's maybe half a dozen people that, I looked at it on paper, I'm like, they started this situation, they escalated it, right? And I simply did what I had to do. I mean, I'm maybe 5% wrong in these scenarios. There's no way I'm making amends for that. And they told me, many old timers, many my peers told me, you'll get drunk if you don't do that. And I just thought it was foolish. And for the next 2 years, that didn't bother me at all. My life was good. I got active in school. I was on the dean's list. I had a fiance. I had my own place at Akron U, right, the birthplace of AA. I had a guy that sponsored me down in Akron and while I was down there, and then my sponsor Gary up in Cleveland, and Dick Day was the guy in Akron. And he took me to this home group, and this guy Jimmy Crawford was there, right? And Jim Crawford had like 280 years of sobriety, right? And he was a sweetheart of a man. And he was one of the original people that started Founders Day. Him and a bunch of other people got together. He was the last one that was alive. And I'll get to him in a minute. So I get down to school, and I'm doing well, and the first 2 years, nothing happens, right? Life is good, life is full. My family respects me again, I'm trusted, just things are good. And I get to this 2-year mark, roughly, and I see one of these half a dozen people at their job, a supermarket, right? And this guy's sitting outside, and he's smoking a cigarette, and it was like I was right back into that violent world, like right away. Like I try to get this guy to swing at me at his job so that he loses his job, because I still want a piece of this guy. And luckily, by the grace of God, I got out of there, and nothing happened, right? My sister's with me, and we just got our stuff and left. He wasn't out there when I came back out. That was the first time I was aware that the resentments in connection with those amends were still alive. Fast forward 18 months. Now, my program starts dwindling over this period of time because I am not willing to deal with those resentments. I am not willing to make those amends still. And they start to eat me alive. And I get to this 3.5-year mark. Now, I'm 21 years old. I'm 3.5 years sober. Well, 22. I just had turned 22. 22 years old, 3.5 years sober, and everything in my life looks good on the outside. But on the inside, I'm dying. These resentments are killing me. My life is like at a dull grind all the time. My teeth are clenched, and inside I feel like a pot of water right before it's ready to boil. Like the little bubbles are in it. Like I'm ready to go off at any time. I'm a shining example of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? And one night I just decided I'm going to drink. I came to the conclusion that tomorrow, Friday, I'm going to go meet up with my buddies and I'm going to drink. And that is insanity, right? I'm not even capable, honestly, of making a decision when it comes to alcohol, right? I've lost that ability. I cannot weigh out the pros and the cons of me taking a drink. I can't hold that in my consciousness. And the next day, I'm still committed. I'm going to go drink tonight. And I get off work and I shower. And the last place I want to be is my house that night. Because my parents are having this guy, Rex, in and out for 10 years, right? Rex finally got a year. Bunch of AAs coming to the house. Going to cook some chicken, a cake, the whole deal. And the last place I want to be is with a bunch of AAs. So I shower up, I'm scooting out of there before anybody gets there. My hand is like hovering over the doorknob, and I open up the door, and there is Rex smiling ear to ear, right? Rex is so excited, he got 1 year of sobriety, finally. And he's like, Bill, how you doing? Isn't it wonderful to be sober? And I don't know what else he said, but I'm like, no, it's not, Rex, right? You'll be miserable in no time. And I don't know what else I said, but I blew past Rex. And there's an AA angel standing between me and the drink, shouting the good tidings of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I blew right past him. I got in my car, I'm driving to my buddy's house, and I'm about a mile away from his house, pull up to this light, there's 2-3 cars in front of me, 3-4 cars next to me. And I stop at the light and I look over, and this woman that's in the program, who was my neighbor growing up as a kid, is completely out of her mind, right? Like she's not in touch with reality. But there's this thing about her that if she senses something is wrong with you, she will not leave it alone until you give it up. So I know this about her. I look over, hi Rosie, right? I smile at her, fakest smile I can muster, and the light turns green, and I slowly pull up, and Rosie whips in behind me, and I move over, and Rosie's on me, and it's a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit on this road, and we're in and out of traffic, like one unit, right? And finally, I just do 100, and I lose her. Right? There's another AA angel between me and the drink. And I don't believe God plays any kind of games with stuff like that, right? But I do believe in AA angels. So I got to my buddy's house, and I tell you, before the drink hit my lips, I felt relief. And when the drink hit my lips, no effect yet, it was like, oh, God, just out my fingertips and my toes. And that drink started to have effect on me. And it felt good, right? For about 45 minutes over at his house, it was spectacular. And then we leave there and we go up to a bar, and my neighborhood buddy owns the bar, and it's like Norm at Cheers. I walk in and hey, let me buy you a drink and good to see you. And this girl I was interested in high school is interested in me, and I'm like, this is nirvana. Why did I ever leave drinking? Why did I ever stop? Right now, there was 45 minutes into the time at the bar, an hour and a half total, that I had a good time. You fast forward a couple hours, that girl's telling me I'm a lush. Several people that I have been lifelong friends with believe that I'm disgustingly and dangerously antisocial, right? Like, what is wrong with you, man? And I'm getting driven home and berated. This girl's telling me I'm a lush. And I was supposed to go to her house. Now she's driving me to my house, dropping me off, telling me I'm a drunk. And that's day one. Day three, my folks find out, and they say, look, we love you. You got to go. We got 3 other children. You are a disaster when you're drinking. I say, hey, I get it. I was young. I was 18 when I quit drinking. I get it. I can control it now, right? I'm good. And so I moved back down to school early, and I start drinking down there. And I'm drinking 10 days. I end up in a crack house by myself in Akron. I have a grand mal seizure in there. And, of course, I got rolled and all that stuff, right? But they had the kindness to try to keep me from biting off my tongue. They put a fork in my mouth. Unfortunately, they used the pointy end. And I had a well-tenderized tongue, I can tell you that. There was blood all over the place, and I come to. Paramedics are asking me questions. I'm instantly lying. I'm making up other people's names, fake Social Security. I end up in a hospital. This is pre-HIPAA. So I end up in a hospital in Akron, and I know a lot of AAs in Akron, right? And the hospitals are full of AA nurses. And so I get admitted here, and my sponsor finds out, then my parents find out, and the next day, they admitted me for that night. And my my parents come down, and I remember just the look of disgust and horror on all of their faces. And I most remember my brother, what he said. He said, Bill, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this to you? Why are you doing this to us? Why? And they, left, and 30 minutes later, I checked myself out and started drinking again. And the next night, a couple of my buddies came down from my hometown up by Cleveland, and I'm down in Akron, and we're all hallucinating. And we're about 45 minutes into the party, and we're having a good time, and I think one of them stole my lighter. And I don't know what happened. I just, if you want to end a conversation, I guarantee you this line works, right? I looked at them both. I said, you know what? I'm going to gut you, and I'm going to wrap your organs around this building. And they stopped talking immediately, right? Yeah. I've used that before, like if I'm in an uncomfortable situation and they won't shut up, I just say, you know what? You know what I'm thinking about? No, I'm just kidding. I hope I never say that again, honestly. But, I got to, they got up and left. They left me alone. Now, I'm not in control of my thinking. And I've got homicidal and suicidal thoughts running through my mind. And I am afraid. And so who do I call? I call AA. I get on the phone with Dick, and hey, Dick, I'm hallucinating, and I don't know what to do. I'm homicidal, I'm suicidal. And now Dick's in like his 60s at this point, and Jim's like in his 80s at this point. And I think they both knew Jesus and stuff. Like they're that old, and they've been sober that long, right? And I'm a 22-year-old, strong, violent, homicidal person. And there's a line in the big book that says, "Stay on the firing line of life, and God will keep you unharmed." And they demonstrated that to me that night. They came in with 15 minutes, "I'll be there, kid," click. Him and Jim got in the car. They came over. They 12-stepped me. They, no fear, came in, got me, grabbed me up, took me to the other Akron ER. And an AA nurse babysat me all night long. The next morning, I ended up at an AA club, and this guy, John, he's asking me, "Hey, man, have you had enough, kid? You've been drinking 12 days. 2 ER visits, right? Lots of violence. Your life's a disaster. You're not even 2 weeks deep." I said, "John, I guess I've known I've been an alcoholic the whole time, but I'm not willing to do what you told me to do. I prayed to this God for 3.5 years, and he let me down." And my parents called and said, "Look, we're worried you're going to die. You can just come home." And so I came home, and the next 5.5 months was just, I would bounce in and out and in and out. I'd stay sober a day or two, and I reintroduced myself. So, the guy that reintroduces himself 3 times a week for like 6 months, right? That was me. And people are getting disgusted with me. And I try to remember that when a guy does that, I try to remember, hey, that was me. And there were just a few people left that reached out to me. I was at a meeting the last time I came back and reintroduced myself. I was in a meeting, and I was really involved in this meeting prior to drinking again. And I probably helped half of the people there get sober, helped them work through the steps. And I reintroduced myself, and nobody came over to talk to me except for one guy, right? One guy who actually demonstrated the 12 steps in his actions. And he never gave up on me. Every time I kept bouncing in and out. So the last weekend I drank, we were down in Kent, right? The Kent shooting sites, Kent College. And we're nothing new. We're in a bar fight. Me and Jimmy are back to back in the street. And, I got a split on my face, lumps on my head. And there's nothing new about this, right? I get home, same type of deal with a girl, right? I was going to meet up with this girl. Instead of taking me back to her place, she's now driving me home after going to the ER telling me what a loser I am. And again, nothing new. And I got home and I just sank into this deep depression. I was actually living somewhere else, but she dropped me off at my parents' house. And so the next 2 days, 3 days, I'm at this house I'm living at, and it's like all the light in my life just left me. Like I was in this really big room, and there was an Edison light bulb that was like hope at the other end of the room. And as this weekend went on, that room got longer and longer, and that speck of light got smaller and smaller until it was just like 1 pixel on the horizon. And I couldn't do this anymore. I ended up in a really rough high-rise apartment that Tuesday morning, and I got a pocket full of money, and I cannot get out of my head. I cannot shut the knot in my gut off, right? It's just eating me alive. I leave there, I get down into my car, and I have some choice words with God, and I am screaming at the top of my lungs, right? If you're there, why did you do this to me? Why did you give me this garbage life, right? You gave me alcoholic parents. I had to deal with all that garbage, and I'm an alcoholic, right? Like I'm screaming top of my lungs in this car, and I get out of there and I leave, and I'm driving down the road, and it's like that light's getting further and further. And I get to this intersection, and the thought crosses my mind, maybe you should just kill yourself. I had thought about killing myself maybe 1,000, 100,000 times before, I don't know. I thought about it a lot. But I had thought about it more in like, poor me. Like, I screwed up last night, I should just kill myself, right? I never really was committed to that idea. But this day I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I can't live another second in my own skin. Not another second. I just want to die. And as I'm turning the corner at this intersection, the thought crosses my mind, maybe you should give AA one more shot. Just one more shot. I say, okay, God help me, and I'll give it one more shot, God, but I'm checking out if this don't work. And I get home, and I pick up the phone, and I call my buddy's house. And back then they had these things called answering machines, right? You actually had to pick the phone up, push the buttons. There was a cord on it that went to the wall. And then, he would get his answering machine and listen to it and call me back. And I hooked up with him that night, and we went to a meeting, and we went to a meeting the next night, and we went to a meeting after the next night after that. And I went over to my sponsor's house after the meeting, and I had stitches, a black eye, lumps all over my head, right? And when I walked in the door, they gave me a little bit of a ribbing, right? Like, oh boy, what does the other guy look like, And boy, drinking really pays off, right? Like they busted my chops for a few minutes, but more importantly, and my sponsor still owes me amends for that. So Gary Marcus, if you ever meet him, he owes me an amends. He said he was gonna, and he didn't. He said if I stayed sober 10 years, he would make amends. Now I'm 29 years sober now, and still not an amends. So I want that recorded for him to hear. But what Gary did do, though, is he stopped. They were playing cards, a game that takes a while to play. It's called back alley gin or rummy or something like that. And they stopped playing, and Gary took me into his study, and we broke open the book, and we started at the doctor's opinion. And Gary told me, I'd heard him say this 100 times. He told me this before. Listen, kid, here's the deal. On your knees in the morning, ask God for the strength to stay sober today. Read a morning meditation book. I don't care which one. Your call. Get to a meeting every day. Call me every day, right? Read 2 pages out of the big book and get on your knees at night and thank God for another day of sobriety. And then we read the doctor's opinion and all that. And I said at the end, I'm like, Gary, listen, I can do all that stuff except for this God deal. I stayed sober 3.5 years. I did everything I thought this God wanted me to do, and I got drunk. I just don't believe that this God is legit, right? This doesn't work. I'm not praying to something I don't believe in. And I made a decision prior to going to Gary's house that I am not going to say I buy anything that I don't buy. Because I come around to you people and you tell me, do you believe in God? Oh, yeah, I was raised Catholic. I believe in God. Like, do I believe in God like I believe the sun is coming up tomorrow? Right? No, I did not believe like that. I believe there was some kind of make-believe God, like people were talking about this morning, like a guy I could make deals with, maybe. But I really didn't believe that I could have a personal relationship with a God. And so I'm going to stop saying I believe anything that I don't believe. And I told Gary, I'm not going to pray. I don't believe in this guy. I said, kid, the obsession, the compulsion is going to come. And the only thing that will stand between you and that drink is that power. And I said, well, Gary, if that happens, I'll pray. But I'm not praying till that happens or until I believe. And believe it or not, I didn't say that cocky. That was as sincere as I could have been at that moment. And I went home and I got busy and I did what Gary told me to do, except for pray. Right? I'm sober about 30 days and I'm reading the book and I'm a student and I'm digging into Alcoholics Anonymous. First time in my life. And I've been sober 3.5 years. This is the first time in my life I walk into a meeting and you guys start talking and I'm like, oh my God, I relate with that. Right? Like, I'd been around here for years. I always felt like I was different than you. Like, you were just a little worse than I was. I was too young or, now whatever had bit you had bit me. I believed it. So I got to work the steps with Gary, and I'm trying to get this first step down. Got that. Trying to get the second step down. It's kind of hard without believing in God. So I'm living at home in my parents' basement, and I think I might be a loser because I might need a job. And I'm going to go out and look for a job. My buddy Bob, who's here tonight, we're going to go look for jobs at the mall that next day. And so I got dressed, I got showered, I get out of the shower, I'm getting dressed, and I smell beer. And I know what's going to happen next, right? That's going to start playing this little tape in my head. You'll see this video going on in my head about this awesome time I'm going to have drinking. And before I know it, it's going to be uncontrollable that I need to take that drink. Every fiber of my being is going to need that drink. And so I got a choice to make. And I get down on my knees and I say the highest level of honesty prayer I could still say today, right? God, I hate your guts. I think all the rotten things that happened to me in my life are your fault. I don't really believe you're there, but if you are, please help me, because stay clean and sober today. And by the way, I think I might be a loser and I might need a job, so let me know if that's what you want me to do. I've been reading Strength and Direction in the book. I get off my knees, no compulsion, no nothing. I meet up with Bob at the front door at Perkins. We walk in the door together, and there's two other guys who are meeting up there, and Bob scoots in, and I'm scooting in after him, and this AA angel, right? Amy, the waitress, comes over and says, "Hey, Bill, how you doing? Do you need a job?" "Oh, as a matter of fact, I do, Amy. Bob and I are going to look for one after this." She brings a thing over. I fill out the application, give it to her. I get an interview set up for the next day. Tell my buddies what happened. They're like, "Hey, dummy. She just asked you if you needed a job." Like, come on. That's like total coincidence. She's known me for years, yada, yada, right? I don't buy that. I called Gary that night. "Hey, Gary, I prayed today." "Good, kid. Just keep praying." "All right, well, I will. But I prayed about this job. What am I supposed to do?" I asked God, should I go get a job or not? And, he said, "Well, you get anything?" "No." "Well, pray about it." I hated that answer. Pray about it. That's a cop-out answer, right? That's what I thought it was. And so I prayed about it, and I got the interview, and things went well. And I got to the interview, and everything went well. And I called Gary that night, and I said, "Gary, interview went good. What am I supposed to do with this job? You praying about it, kid?" "Yeah." "Any indication?" "No, none." Right? Like, I'm talking, God, and I'm trying to listen, but I'm getting nothing. And so the next day they call me, offer me a job. Can I call you back? Right? I got to check. I call my sponsor. He says, "You got anything, kid?" "No." And he said, "Well, pray about it some more and make a decision based on what you think God wants you to do." And I prayed about it some more, and I started thinking about it through these circumstances. And a lot like the talk earlier, right? I started seeing the signs that God had put this in front of me. And it didn't really actually matter whether that was the right path or not. Like Merton, right? I don't know if I'm on the right path. All I do know is that if I try to follow your will, God, you will take me to the right path. As long as I do everything I can to try to follow your path, you will guide me to the right one. And so I take this job, $5 an hour cooking. I've got no experience cooking, right? I'm a total rookie, nothing. I'm there a week, bunch of drunks in the kitchen, practicing alcoholics, and they're like, "Hey man, you suck, right? You can't cook very well," and they're hammering me. And I go home discouraged. I come back the next day, and I'm getting ready for the lunch rush. I have the last cigarette before lunch, light the cigarette, and as I light it, "God, please help me be the best cook that I can be today. Not the best cook in this kitchen, not the best cook anywhere, just the best job I can do today." I finished the cigarette, washed the hands, back on the line, and it was like a miracle happened from the day before. I nailed every order. They didn't need to help me one time. And when I was leaving, and throughout the day, they were attaboying me. "Man, you're killing it today, Monreal. Good job," right? Like, they're patting me on the back. Now, I'm walking out of there like, "You are a champion, Monreal. I mean, my God, you crushed it. Look at the difference in 2 days," right? Like, maybe you should open your own restaurant and, and I drive home and I think back through that morning and I said that prayer. And that's how my relationship with my God developed. I'm not going to run you through all the steps or anything like that. And obviously there's a lot of drinking in that part of the story, but I hope you saw that throughout that whole time there's like pieces of the program happening, little pieces coming together. I work the 12 steps the way they're outlined in the big book. There is no other way, in my opinion, right? Like, the way they're outlined in the big book is the way to do it. I got married. I met my wife at that job. We have 2 beautiful children. We're still married. I started a business when I was early on in sobriety. That wasn't enough, so I started another one. I sponsored about 7 million people in my first 2 years. I was convinced that if you came to me, no matter how desperate of a case you were, I could fix you, right? Like, I could save you because I knew the answer. I later came to learn that that's not at all how that works, but at that time, that's what I believed. But I abandoned my family in that process from like year 2 to year 5. My family's at home. My poor wife's got 2 children, and she's struggling. And when I come home, I'm not nice to her. I'm not happy, right? Now, one business fails. The second one's going down because I financed that business with the first one. And my wife says, "You know what? You're miserable. You talk to me like a dog. I don't want to be married to you anymore. I don't love you." And so now I'm facing divorce. I got two businesses collapsing, and I call a buddy, and within an hour, there's 15 AAs in my house. And I got to work. Long and short, I came out of that, like, look, sobriety's still got to stay number one. My relationship with my God, my attendance at AA meetings, working with new guys, the praying and the principles and all that, it's got to stay number one in my life. But hopefully an indistinguishable second is my family. And an indistinguishable third are my good friends, right? Like the people that came out to support me, right? Like that, and then a distant fourth, if I'm doing well, is the chase for success. So I got to about 10 years sober, and in between these periods of time, my life was good. Way better than I ever thought it could ever be. Everything that I was looking for in the drink, I found in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I've come to the point where I feel okay in my own skin after a number of years, right? After 5-6 years, I felt okay in my own skin, and I still continue to feel that way, knowing the good and the bad about myself. I got 10 years sober, found out I had spina bifida, Agent Orange, my dad. I needed surgery. I waited a few years, finally got it, nearly died as a byproduct of the surgery. And I came out of that surgery, and I started realizing that, I was doing step 11, but I was doing prayer and not really any meditation, right? Not the meditation they outline in the book. I was praying, and I was looking for the answer, but I really wasn't taking my day to God. I really wasn't asking him to direct me throughout the day like the prayer outlines in, 86, 84, 5, 6, right? So I started incorporating that, and I started meditating. And I was of the opinion at that point that meditation was for sissies. And I just, you were just a weak-willed individual if you meditated. I was totally wrong, but that was my opinion. And then I lit a candle, and I tried to stare at it for 5 minutes. And it was very apparent to me in a short amount of time who the sissy was, right? I find meditation to be very, very powerful in my life. Sitting and trying to listen for the answers. Sitting and just letting go, right? Like, there are days that, we were talking about thoughts earlier, writing them down, right? There's days that the thoughts just keep coming. There are other days they go away. But on the days that they keep coming, all the barbs get knocked off, right? None of them cut me. And they can be anything. I fast forward about 6 years ago, my wife got diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had a real dark night of the soul start right then, like almost immediately. And for about the next 3 years, I felt like God was distant from me. Right? Like he was there. I believed he was there. Like the sun is on the other side of the earth at night, but I could not see the sun. I could not feel its warmth. And I felt alone, but I knew he was there, and I kept acting as if. And it was tough. And, the long and short of the whole thing is like, it was like the footprints in the sand. I could either complain that God's dragging me along, 2 footprints and drag marks, or I could be happy that he's carrying me and be grateful that he's doing that for me. And I'm happy to say my wife is cancer-free, 5 years. Yeah. And I'm very glad that she made it through that. The long and short, right? There's only 2 things that I know to be absolutely true when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous. Number 1, that I have a relationship with a God that is personal to me, that works. That power is delivered whenever I need it. And 2, that the 12 steps work if you work them the way they're outlined in the book. Thank you.